Okay, we've been to Japan. There's a lot to go over. We are going to get to the stuff that you're going to want to get to. First, we're going to just sum up all the racing from the weekend, and then the Marc stuff is coming, don't worry. In MotoGP, Martín is just, I mean, what do we have to say now? I mean, it's really, this is a straight shoot now, straight fight to the finish. We're 3 points in it, we're basically level. Best man wins from here on. And I think the thing we maybe didn't expect, or at least I didn't expect, was that you get to a wet race like this and Martín would show that much confidence to go and push the way he did and just look so comfortable when it was like that wet, that tough, and you expect it from like your Oliveira's and Zarcos and stuff, but it just shows, I think, when you get a rider that's in form, you can be like, well, he's not a wet weather specialist, whatever. If he's that in tune with what he's doing with his bike, that confident and has that good feel, it just all looks easy for him. All conditions, any situation, he's going to be able to master it. And look, Pecco's not been bad here. You know, Pecco's had a good weekend, but he's hanging on. There's nothing you can do about Martín at the minute when he's like that. 5 wins out of the last 6 races, obviously including your sprints and things like that, I think it is now. Pecco, good, but it's at the point now where, like I said, we're basically level. He's going to have to start winning races again. It's time for him to not be able to play it safe. He has to push now, and I think that is brilliant for us watching. So it's going to be like a heavyweight bout coming to the end of the season, throwing punches at one another, and I, for one, am looking forward to it. We'll quickly mention Marc now before we mention him again later. Nice podium for him. He would have been happy with that, and he described it as a romantic podium, which gave us a bit of a hint as to what was coming. Speaking of the Repsol Honda, Mir looked like he had another good weekend. Obviously, he didn't get the result in the end with some issues, but it looks like he's gaining confidence there, and that'll set them up well going into next season. They'll need a stable lead rider in that team who can get results when they maybe shouldn't be there, and generally just be on decent pace, bring it home every week. If he can start getting into that form, which is like Mir's thing, wasn't it, before he started becoming a crasher. If he can start doing that again, KTM. Carbon chassis was lightning on, I think it was Friday under Brad Binder. Then Miller started to put it together on the carbon chassis as well. Basically, it seems like it's brought them back up to the form they were in at the start of the season. So somewhere there, they've lost something or lost ground, and the carbon chassis sort of given it back. Whether it's such a game changer that it's going to put them in front, I don't know, but it definitely has given them a little leg up in bringing themselves back to the front of the field where their 2 riders can compete. Brad, excellent on the Saturday, crashed on the Sunday, and then Miller, good on both days, I'd say, and sort of brought him back up to where he should be. So they'll take confidence from that. And who else is going to develop a carbon chassis now? Because it looks like it has given them something. So there's something in it. Everybody's going to be working on one now. And just a couple little notes I've taken here. Zarco, unlucky with the ruling about where he entered the pit lane from, meant he was excluded from the restart, which means when we didn't get a restart, he was excluded from the results. But at the same time, he did crash. So that's why he was coming in from there. So does he deserve to be, going a lap back and taking the positions from there and whatever? Finishing 6th or whatever it would have been. But one of those ones where it's like, it's a harsh ruling, but the rules are there, they're written in black and white, and you have to enter the pit lane from the right place. So does the punishment fit the crime? I don't know. That one's up to you, personal opinion. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And then Raul Fernandez had a penalty, or entering for his bike change at the wrong point, or stopping at the wrong point. It was something like that, and he's been quite critical of the ruling, because he did get a long lap penalty for it. And he made a decent point, I think, where he said, you can go plowing into people, get a long lap penalty, or you can just miss your pit thing, which affects no one and hurts no one, and get the same penalty for that. I guess that ruling exists because on the extreme end of that, people were just flying into the pit lane wherever they wanted. It can be dangerous. So there's a rule specific, you have to enter in this point. That's one of those things where there could be a sliding scale. Like if you've done something dangerous in the pit lane in a bike spot, it could be a long lap penalty. But if you've just innocently missed an entry point or something, does it have to be the same punishment? But then again, you get into grey areas where it's like the stewarding, where like, well, if you run someone off the road and then they're just judging it by their own judgment. So is it better that the rule is black and white and it's like, look, it's unlucky, or should we have a bit of leniency and a bit of subjectivity in assessing, oh look, he's stopped at the wrong spot, but it's not really that far out and it's not hurt anyone, so can we just give him a slap on the wrist or a fine or something? Again, another one that's going to be personal opinion for you. And we awarded full points in the end for a 50% race finish. Now, I feel like this is one of those rules that was maybe made before sprint races came in, because then you've had a sprint race, 12-lap race that's awarded half points, and then you've had a half distance race, 12-lap race that's awarded full points. I'm wondering if that's just a rule that stayed in, even though we introduced sprint races and then it wasn't reassessed, or they decided to just not bother with looking into that rule and how that might possibly happen, where you end up with 2 same length races that are awarded different amounts of points. Should that rule with sprint races coming in where you do have a 50% race that is awarded 50% points, should a 50% race distance finish in the main race now only award half points? Interesting question. I think probably. I'd like to see 75 or 70% race distance covered before you're awarded full points, because I think, and here's my theory on it, if you know that the race is only 12 laps, you ride to a 12 lap checkered flag. If you are in a race and you're expecting the full distance, 24 laps, you will ride a 24 lap race. And then if it gets cut on 12 laps, you might be thinking to yourself, well, I would have pushed earlier. And that is something that is an important point for what happened in this particular race, because you see guys like Marc and that, and Miller, one of the only 2 guys that started on the softer tyre, obviously had to go easier early on when it wasn't as wet, because you shred that tyre when that circuit was still just a little bit damp but not quite wet. Fine once, if it's the same consistent amount of wetness for the whole race, maybe. But when conditions are changeable like that, guys have ridden that race to arrive at 24 laps. So to award full points at 50% race distance, I think 75%, I think you can be like, fine. At 50% race distance, I'd like to maybe see the points reduced even a little bit. But look, it's one of those things that I think was probably written into the rule book as if you get to 50%, you get full points when sprint races didn't exist. If that isn't the case, if that is something that got brought in, because I do think it used to be 75% race distance, or was it over 75% race distance you couldn't restart? I think that might have actually been it. You could call the race, there was no possible restart. But if it's over 50%, you get full points and they can call the race, but you also have the option to restart it if possible. I'd like to see that reassessed coming into next season probably, but I mean, it's not something that comes up that often, and really, I don't have that many strong feelings about it. I just think if I could make an adjustment to that, I probably would. Now in Moto2, Somcat Chantra had a perfect weekend. I think he topped every session. This guy, he's one of those guys, Chantra, when he gets into certain circuits, particularly in Asia, he's basically Pedro, and then you get other races throughout the season where he's just a mid-pack runner, you know? And he spends more time in the mid-pack or in the lower half of the top 10, generally around 10, than he does near the front. But when he's on, he's literally as good as anyone in the field. And there's a supreme talent there waiting to discover some consistency and discover some form on tracks that aren't his favourites. Yeah, happy for him to get the win there. I think he'll have a really good flyaway season here through Asia. So he really will mix it up a little bit. It'll be nice to see. I mean, Acosta's, it's not going to make any difference in championship or anything like that. I think it's done. It might stop Acosta winning as many races as he probably could coming into the end of the season. Iger, a nice second place. Might feel like he could have been closer to Chantra, but Chantra, I think it was winning that either way. Acosta's banking points there. Why take the risk? Why bin it? Why hurt yourself? Just do your thing and go home. Arbolino, a little bit of return to form in the last round. Back down to riding like he's not a title contender this week. I think he'll just do that for the rest of the season probably. On Acosta's ride, it was a bit of a recovery job. He did get shafted wide early in the race, probably in the first couple of corners. I think it's a walk in the park for him to just run around and pick up those positions and get back to his podium and just be like, well, can I get to second? Maybe not. I'll just come third. I've won the title anyway. Everyone else, Arbolino, Dixon, they're all behind me. And last note was Salach had a nice little return to form, which will take a bit of confidence from, because we did have a great start to the season. I've not really mentioned him since then because he's not done anything. Moto3 was interesting. Jaume Masia has once again legged it at the front, but this time with a little bit of help. Dennis Onchu, every time you think, the kid's got his head down now. He looks like he's matured a bit. He goes and does something silly like this, where the red mist just descends on him and he gets racy when he doesn't need to, and then bins it because he's all excited and trying to push too hard. So battle for second. I mean, I say battle for second. They were just line astern. Masia, Sasaki, Onchu, and Olgado. Probably 3 out of the 4 of those guys were happy where they were. The only one that wasn't happy was Dennis Onchu, who, instead of, they could have just stayed in that order and got to the last 2 or 3 laps, last 5 laps. And then if you felt like at that point you wanted to turn it into a scrap, you could do. And you're a chance to win the race then, because the pressure's a bit higher. At that point there, Masia is not going to make a mistake at the front if you give him a half a second and then it ended up being a second. It's just going to nail down the laps. And you've handed him the win there by making a race of it with 12 laps to go, or 13, 14 laps to go, whatever it was, and just scrapping for second. Now, the only reason I can think of in my head, other than he was just being stupid and not thinking at all, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say he was thinking. Maybe he was thinking, I don't think I have the pace to win this even if it gets to the end. My best option here is to scrap with Sasaki for second and try and take second. Or B, I'm not happy with Sasaki just sitting there, because he thought Masia could get away anyway, and he felt like he needed to get in front of Sasaki and then make Masia's day tough. If you asked him, I think he'd probably say that. I've not heard any interviews with him or anything since then. I've not been on top of it, but if he was going to give a reason, he'd probably give that one. But basically, we had a grandstand finish messed up, and then we did have a grandstand finish for second, to be fair. It was a really nice fight for second, and Sasaki probably justifiably pipped Olgato on the line for second. Championship lead extends, so I think it's 6 points over Sasaki now. So still tight, still a lot to play for, and I think Sasaki, he has to win a race this season, doesn't he? Now onto the stuff that we actually want to talk about. And you know what? I didn't get my video filmed this week straight after the race on the Monday or Tuesday like I usually would do. It's Thursday, and finally it's actually worked out for us for once, because it's actually meant that the Marc news has come out before I've had a chance to film the video, so I can talk about it in the video rather than having to make a separate video now compared to, you know. Now he's leaving Honda. It's all announced. It's all official. He's released a nice statement saying it was a difficult decision, and I'm sure it was a lot of sentimental attachment to the people, the company itself, the bike, and the sponsors. So tough decision, but at the end of the day, he's obviously weighed up. Does he think he can win a world title if he goes to a satellite Ducati? He does. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, the hint was made with the romantic comment, which maybe was a hint, or if he just said it off the cuff without realizing, picked up on straight away by Pecco. And the writing was on the wall when Gigi Dall'Igna came out, say a couple of days beforehand, and literally just said the words, Marc wants to ride a Ducati, which at that point, I mean, a lot of people saying, oh yeah, well, it's obvious, we already knew that. But I don't think there was anyone had ever actually said that was involved on either camp that he wants to do this. We all just assumed he wanted to do it, but it was like, you know, and then Gigi went on to say, you know, the only thing stopping it now is a contractual issue whether Marc can break his contract. I don't know. I felt like that was big news for me. So big that I wrote, like literally the day before Marc's announced this, I released on my Substack, which you can subscribe to down below in the description. I'll leave a link to my Substack where I send out a newsletter every now and then. And this week's one was about those comments and about Marc's decision, and how I felt like this was the first time that it really, really did feel like it was officially going to happen. I mean, it doesn't really send this silly season into overdrive, because there's only a couple more puzzle pieces that need to be put into place now. And that is what a Honda going to do with their riders, because there's nothing else to be done. But what I do think it does send into chaos is next season's silly season, where you get a lot now of contracts that, like, Marc will be on 1 year, I'm telling you, and there'll be a lot of other contracts expiring at the end of next season. And there's going to be a huge, massive reshuffle, whether it turns out that things keep trending the way they're trending in terms of riders' form and what they're doing. Then they're going to be looking like, can we get Martín into the factory Ducati? And then they're going to be talking to Marc, because Marc's going to be going, well, I need to be in the factory Ducati because I'm the biggest star you've got in this stable. And then Pecco's going to go, well, you can't have my spot in the factory Ducati team. I won your world championship. And Bestia's, if Bastianini turns around and beats Pecco one-on-one next year in the factory team, then what do you do? So there's a lot to be done here. There's going to be some top factory level riders in satellite bikes again. And the reshuffle is going to be massive. And I think you're going to see, you're going to have to find a place for Pedro in a factory KTM, probably, if he doesn't get it this year. And we'll talk about KTM in just a second. I mean, the obvious thing, I think the most sensible thing that can happen here is Zarco goes to Repsol, because his contract with Honda, I believe, is a Honda contract, not an LCR contract. It's a factory Honda contract. So I think he'll automatically just go straight into Repsol Honda now to partner Joan Mir. Two experienced heads in there, which is good for them. The obvious move for them is to take an already Honda rider and bring him in. And I think it will be Lecuona, because it makes the most sense. I would suggest Ayagura, but he's expressed absolutely no interest in stepping up to MotoGP with a Honda, or a satellite Honda at least. I don't know why that is. He's waiting for a better offer from another factory. He wants to get on a more competitive bike. He's waiting for KTM or Aprilia to come in for him, or a Ducati. I mean, you're just delaying your progress into MotoGP and perhaps maybe your development, but I guess he's doing what he thinks is best for him. But I would suggest that Honda would be keen to bring him in and have an all-Japanese team. How their deal with LCR works, I don't know, because they obviously have Taka there, and that's their rider that they've placed there, the Japanese rider that they'd like to have there just to represent Honda in Japan. Whether it would need to be the second rider in that team is Lucio's decision to bring in, I don't know. But I think what's going to happen is Lecuona is going to end up there. I don't know if they would discuss an Ayagura move and if he would even be open to it, but it seems like he's not. But that would be an obvious one for me as well. The other thing that we'll bring into it, and this is where we bring KTM into it, is so obviously, ladies and gentlemen, as soon as I finished recording this and I'm in the process of editing, it has of course been announced that Augusto Fernandez is staying at the Gas Tech 3 side to be joined by Pedro Acosta. I do go on in this bit to speak about Augusto Fernandez almost with the assumption that he probably might be the one to miss out. But it hasn't worked out that way. Pole's gone, and it looks like he'll step back into a reserve role, something like that. Maybe a couple of wild cards throughout the season. I do think now that you look at it like that, probably is a sensible decision. It would have been, imagine KTM going on and sacking off 3 rookies 3 years in a row, whatever it would have been. So anyway, that decision has been made, and yeah, so you can. I'm going to leave this next bit in there, but you can see where my thought process was as I speak about it. Oh, and forgot to mention in the video as well that last week I had a video do really, really well. Got over, almost 2,500 views at this point. And I wanted to thank everybody who watched the video, commented. I got a lot of comments on it, so thanks very much for your comments. Still trying to get through some of them and answer them. And all the new subscribers that we've picked up off it. So thanks very much. Hope you're enjoying the channel so far. Cheers. Do they look at someone like Augusto Fernandez to bring in? A guy who's had a solid first year. He looks decent. He's probably going to be unlucky to lose his ride to Pedro Acosta here, which looks like is what's going to happen with KTM. Acosta's going to go in on a gas, whether it be a full factory spec bike, I don't know. Possibly. He'll be on the carbon frame and all. To replace Augusto Fernandez, which he will be offered a test or behind the scenes role, test and development role, third rider role. I'm assuming they'll be looking to give him a wild card or 2. If your Honda is at maybe best to poach a talent like that, bring into LCR. Would Cecchinello be interested in that? He probably would be. I think would give you more than Lecuona would give you. I genuinely think he would. Or do they think outside the box? A lot of these riders, Moto2 and in Superbikes, will have break clauses for MotoGP rides. Do you look at it? Does Dorna try and get a Dixon in there? Do you look at a Dixon? You could do. Arbolino is another one, although I don't think they would. You can look at and think well outside the box, and do you look across to World Superbikes and see a guy that you could get across who maybe be willing to take another second chance on a struggling bike, maybe like a Remy Gardner or someone like that. I'm extremely doubtful on that one, but I'd like to see it. But I think it will be Lecuona, but I'd like to see them go for Augusto Fernandez. Now, if only KTM had a Superbike team they could ship all their talents off to that they tend to just dump consistently, because they are losing these talents to other companies, and I think it would be a nice little get for Honda to bring him across. And yeah, big breaking news. Marc, not officially announced at Gresini yet, but that will come. What I've gathered is with one of Gresini's major sponsors being, I think it's Thai or Indonesian or Malaysian, one of the Southeast Asian countries. One of the best sponsors is from one of those countries. And when we go there, it will be a huge PR opportunity to see Marc announcing that he's going to be joining that team in front of the sponsor's home Grand Prix crowd. It's going to be huge. It's honestly one of the biggest shake-up moves we've seen, and I can't think of the last one. My initial instinct is to go back to Rossi to Yamaha, or Rossi to Ducati, or Rossi back to Yamaha. But since then, I don't think we've seen a move as massive as this. Maybe Jorge to Ducati? Maybe. I feel like this is much bigger than that. This feels more like a Rossi to Yamaha. Actually, no, because this has been on the cards for months. Willy won't he? That was just like, Rossi's like, I'm just jumping ship to a worse bike. Anyway, it's a big move. It's a massive move. I mean, I can't think of the time I would ever have seen a rider that considered one of the best riders of all time willingly swap a factory ride for not just any satellite team, but you'd have to say probably equal, maybe third satellite team in the pecking order at Ducati. Because it obviously goes factory, Pramac, VR46, Gresini. It'd be interesting to see if he's negotiated himself all the latest parts as well from Ducati. We'll see. It's going to be very interesting. And next year's transfer market is going to be crazy. So anyway, if you enjoyed this video, there's more videos you can click on the screen for you right now. You can subscribe to that Substack where I release little articles and bits and pieces that get delivered straight to your inbox for free. And other than that, we will see you on the next one. Enjoy your week off, and we'll see you later on. Take it easy.